On the second day of the Land Redistribution Conference, whereby the country wants to transfer 43% or 15 million hectares of its arable agricultural land to previously disadvantaged blacks by 2020. The country's President Hage Geingob on Monday officially opened the second National Land Conference in Windhoek amid a boycott by some key stakeholders. Over 800 delegates will for the next 5 days deliberate on various issues to try and resolve the lingering land questions. The Land Conference will discuss and review the resolutions of the first National Land Conference of 1991. Sadly, though, the conference has been boycotted by several traditional leaders, civil society organizations and political parties. They allege that the summit has predetermined outcomes. It aims to find a lasting solution to the country's land questions. During the colonial period from the late 19th century, local communities in central and southern Namibia were evicted from their rich pastoral land. It was then given to white settlers.
Well, for more on this, we are joined via Skype from Windhoek in Namibia by Uhuru Dempers. He is a development specialist and a human rights activist with keen interest in socio-economic rights and social protection issues. A very good evening to you, Mr. Dempers. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you give us an analysis of how the Land Summit is going?
Good evening, Sempo, and thanks for having me. Yes, we have kicked off yesterday with the second National Land Conference. The first conference was held 27 years ago, so we are gathered to review progress over the past 27 years. The picture doesn't look that good. We've had very slow progress of land reform. The National Statistics Agency just indicated that more than 70% of productive agricultural land is still in the hands of the white minority. There's elite capture in communal areas where the wealthy, well-connected have fenced off the land. There's huge urbanization that has taken place, and we have about 40% of our population now in urban areas living in shacks, and access to land for housing also becomes critical. So these are some of the issues that we have gathered to discuss, but the progress so far has been very disappointing.
Now, Uhuru, who currently owns the land that will be redistributed, and would they be compensated in any way?
Yes, we have had two colonial regimes, the German colonial regime, and this land was taken off from the indigenous populations through very violent means. There was genocide even committed in 1904 to 1908, and massive land dispossession. When the South Africans took over, they took even the little land that was left. So the indigenous populations were left in communal reserves, and the most productive and arable land is in the whites of the white minority. There's also about 280 farms that are owned by absentee landlords. And despite our resolutions 27 years ago that this land be expropriated, government has not taken action. There's been some, I think, less than 5 farms expropriated, and there were some legal issues. Government was asked to go back to the drawing board and define expropriation criteria. It took, unfortunately, government 10 years to develop this criteria, and it was only gazetted early this year. So there is a serious lack of political commitment from our political leadership to take action to redistribute land. The budget for land reform has been shamefully low. We've only spent 1.9 billion Namibian dollars over the past 27 years on land reform, particularly on land acquisition. So there's been a widespread dissatisfaction throughout the country. And with elections approaching next year, government has no option then to seriously address this issue. As you have said in the introduction, unfortunately, some of the traditional leaders felt that the conference was not properly constituted and have stayed away, but the rest of civil society and other stakeholders are at the table, and we are discussing and debating these issues, and issues like ancestral land claims are at the center of these debates and discussions.
So basically, white people, or should I say the current landowners, will not be compensated in any way?
Well, our constitution is part of a negotiated settlement. There were the 1982 principles that was enforced in our constitution as part of the negotiations for our independence. So in the chapter 3 of our constitution, which is entrenched, which can not be amended, it requires that there be just and fair compensation when the land is expropriated. We have been arguing that we need to define this just and fair so that it can be in the interest and be biased to the needs of the landless and not only the farm owner. So as the situation changed now and within the current legal and constitutional limitations, there will be compensation, but how that compensation will be calculated and what will be compensated, that is up for discussion at this conference. And based on the resolutions that we'll take at the end of this conference, we will be instituting the required legal and constitutional amendments if needed, so that we can speed up the land reform program.
And having said that, Uhuru, what kind of cooperation that you need from the white landowners, to resolve the land imbalances in Namibia?
Well, unfortunately, our brothers that owns land, which is about 4,000 white commercial farmers, have not really come to the party. They have offered land, substantial amounts of land to government, but government has not been able to afford this land because the prices has just been inflated. So we are saying that the willing buyer, willing seller concept that we have been using at the moment is not working. In fact, in the consultations that we had in the regions, there is not a single region that has favored this form of land acquisition. Therefore, we are looking at more a method of expropriation. Unfortunately, even the Agricultural Union had a chance to make a presentation yesterday, and they still stick to their guns that government must buy land from them on market prices, which is unsustainable, and it's unacceptable, and it's really not playing in the framework of the policy of national reconciliation that we have adopted at our independence. And the landless, those that are dispossessed of their land, are really getting impatient. Government is unable to calm people down because the inequality, the injustice can just not be allowed to continue. I mean, Namibia is, after South Africa, the most unequal country in the world, and land ownership is part of that picture. Therefore, unfortunately, our white brothers and sisters have not really come to the party, and there's not been a political push from our leaders. And the aim of this conference, from our perspective, is really to push our political leadership to be able to act. And the speakers that has taken the floor so far from various community and civil society groups has requested for a urgent action from government to expropriate land and to address landlessness in the country, including in the urban areas where there is a total lack of service land for housing, especially for the low income. I mean, 40% of our population lives in shacks at the moment. That's very shameful for a country that has been declared as an upper middle income country.
Okay, now this issue is gradually becoming highly politicized, and you just mentioned that Namibia is going to the polls next year. So how then do you respond to allegations that the conclusions of this land conference, I mean, this conference rather, has got predetermined conclusions?
Well, we are here at the conference to make sure that the will of the people is respected. So we have discovered some draft resolutions and papers and so on, and we know that there are different interest groups there. We know that there's elite capture within our government, and we know there are interest groups that wants to maintain the status quo or that wants to change things in their direction. But we are here to make sure that that manipulation and that intimidation does not take place. And we have, from the start of the conference, made it very clear that we're going to monitor the process until the end to make sure that the will of the people will be carried at the end of the day. So there are those allegations. We trust the president when he said in his opening address that there are no predetermined resolutions and recommendations, and we've deployed our cadres in the different thematic working groups and so on, to act as rapporteurs and as chairpersons and so on, to make sure that there's no manipulation of the process and that the will of the people are respected at the end of the day.
Unfortunately, we don't have much time, Uhuru, but I'm going to ask you to be as brief as you possibly can. And I want to engage you on the issue of the sticking point around the issue of ancestral claim and ownership in Namibia.
Yes, what we really want is the recognition that the land question has affected Namibian communities to varying degrees. There must be that recognition, which we did 27 years ago, but there has not been affirmative action to make sure that those that were most worst affected, those that were land dispossessed, that there is some kind of compensatory intervention so that people can get access to land, but also there could be other empowerment programs to empower those communities. So ancestral land claims is high on the agenda. We will not be able to resolve the issue. We are hoping that we will establish some independent commission to be able to further investigate this and also engage citizens as we try to find solution to this issue.
All right. Uhuru, thank you so much. We do appreciate your insight. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, Uhuru Dempers, he's a development manager and a human rights activist with keen interest in socio-economic rights and social protection issues from Namibia.